For this demo, I'm going to follow Bob Williams, a brand manager for frozen food brands at a company called The Food Company. Bob wants to check the status of his KPIs after last month's actuals have become available. As a brand manager, Bob is primarily concerned with how his brand is performing in terms of profitability, margin, and sales volume. SAP Total Margin Management allows him to track, optimize, and course-correct his plan for these KPIs. Bob logs into his account. As he logs in, his pre-configured dashboard for tracking his key KPIs is loading. It's currently the month of May, and actuals for April have just come in. Immediately, Bob can see that the actual margin for April is lower than planned. Sales volume appears to be good, so something else must be going on here. Switching to his profit and loss report for his brand, Bob is going to look at the detailed numbers for the month of April. Here he can see again that the product contribution margin is much lower than his plan. He can also see that gross sales is higher than he planned, and that cost of goods sold looks like it is causing the problem with his profitability. Moving to his contribution margin report, Bob notes that in the month of April, cost of goods sold has spiked. This is definitely what is causing his reduced profitability. He needs to understand what is driving this increase in his cost of goods sold. He switches reports to the cost component breakdown, which will show his costs at their lowest level in the system. Here, he can see his actual costs versus his planned costs, and the variance between the two. Scrolling down, Bob can see that his overheads are on track, as well as his freight and labor costs. However, his material costs seem to have spiked for tomatoes. Inspecting this development, Bob can see that there is a variance of approximately $1.8 million. This is definitely what is driving the loss of profitability. He needs to compare his actual material costs with his planned costs. Switching to his material costs plan, Bob can see that he had expected tomato prices to remain flat through the year. However, the plan clearly shows that tomato prices have increased in April. He'll need to discuss this with his procurement team. The procurement team says that a long winter and late spring frosts have adversely affected the tomato crop. Bob needs to update his plan with new material rates and understand his exposure to this price increase. Taking the updated material costs from his team, Bob updates his material rates plan. He can see that tomato prices for the months of June and July will stay flat, but through the rest of the year, prices are steadily increasing each month. SAP Total Margin Management is now recalculating the cost of goods sold. Bob wants to take a look at his margin forecast on the dashboard. It shows him that previously, the margin situation through the end of the year looked very favorable. When he refreshes the data to reflect the updated material costs, he sees a different story. Margin has declined significantly through the rest of the year. Bob needs to course correct and understand what strategies he can use to mitigate this problem. He considers his options and decides that adjusting his production schedule may be the best one. What he'll do is shift production to the months when tomatoes are relatively cheap. Although this strategy will incur additional warehousing and inventory costs, his hope is that taking advantage of the lower material costs will be enough to offset this and improve profitability. Using SAP Total Margin Management, Bob can model scenarios like these in order to be confident about the predicted outcome. Both supply and demand and cost of goods sold are now being recalculated. Switching back to his dashboard, Bob observes again that his margin had declined as a result of the higher material costs. Let's find out what effect adjusting the production plan has had on margin. Bob can see that adjusting the production plan has had a very favorable effect on margin. and profitability through the end of the year has improved. This was only one of many strategies that Bob could have modeled in SAP Total Margin Management. For example, he could have simulated alternative recipes by adjusting his BOM to use lower-grade tomatoes or tomato paste. He could also have looked to take a forward position on tomatoes and keep his production schedule the same. Or he could have looked at reducing his promotion and marketing to reduce his exposure to higher prices through lower sales volume. Increasing the prices of his finished goods was also an option. SAP Total Margin Management lets Bob model these scenarios and helps him realize the best possible outcome for his brands.